But now it was almost kind of mandated to us. We were in daycare, but in a good way, like, hey, we see a need. It was a daycare teacher, and she was spot on, because our twins had some speech delays and stuff. What a great program.
Yes.
But not a lot of people know about it. But it's something that I think that's kind of like your first step into the understanding of, does my child need some extra help?
Hi, friends and family, and welcome to another episode of Pam and the Purple Couch podcast. Today, we're going to deep dive into what type of classroom setting really fits your student. Low functioning, high functioning, level 1, level 2, level 3. What really fits your kid? That's what we're going to talk about today on the Purple Couch podcast. So, Manny, we're talking about it. Where does my kid go?
Yeah.
What does it mean my kid's low functioning? My kid's high functioning? My kid's middle of the road? All these labels, labels and labels. And then like we've talked about the different levels of diagnosing autism spectrum disorder. But it's not just autism.
Nope.
We have to look at a child holistically, the entire child. And I think the first thing I want to hone in on this before we get into what class really is for your kid is, what age is appropriate for your kid to start school?
Okay, yeah, that's good.
We have this misnomer across the United States that as soon as a kid turns 5 years of age, you need to be in kindergarten. Well, yeah. I ran into some families and they were asking me about, well, what are the developmental milestones? And I'm like, based on who? When my mom gave birth to me, that's pre-Gen Xers and all that good generational. We can all add it. I am 49 wonderful years old, guys. So there's your baseline. I love every year I have been on this earth, okay? And I'm taking full credit for them. But when we're talking about that, Dr. Spock was the book that all parents did what they were supposed to. That's come and gone, okay? And when we look at a child, we have to look at them social emotionally before we put anything else on their plate.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen it, kindergarten or first graders, you know, and I say first graders because I know the classroom specifically, and those kids have come to me with pressures of college and what do I want to be when I grow up? And I'm like, how about just being a kid for right now?
Yeah, yeah.
But what we see, especially in early intervention, is a lot of 5-year-old boys, girls that are not ready for the pressures of even going into school yet.
Oh yeah, I mean, most of our audience already knows, and if they don't know, my wife and I have twins that are 3.5, almost 4 years old in September, and we're already talking about VPK and pre-K and kindergarten, and they're just about to turn 4, and it is the dynamic of the pressure of our society today, here, at least here in the United States, right?
Yes.
Because if they're not walking, talking, laughing, receptive language, expressive language, you know, their ABCs or nursery rhymes, all this stuff, following instructions, it's just a list of stuff.
We're well versed in this.
Yeah.
And yet when you're saying that, did you see your own body language is like the list? Did you see them, guys?
It's out of control.
It's like it's going on and on and on.
And if they're not there, then it's like, oh wait, they're not there
Yes.
yet. And we even had the dynamic just recently with the whole potty training thing. So add to the dynamic, put communication skills, social skills, all those other pressures.
Oh, but if they're not potty trained, they can't go to preschool,
that's
stay
a dead
in daycare.
stop, which is ridiculous.
Yes.
And so we have the dynamic where, what a lot of families do, if they have siblings, doesn't even have to be twins, just siblings, and one sibling's ahead of the other. So we have twins, they're same age. The little girl, totally potty trained. She can go to the next level, but not Junior. So I don't know what happened, because I think Junior got a little social pressure because now he's getting potty trained just in the last few weeks. And
that's very key. So guys, do you hear what he's talking about? Social pressure at 3.
Yeah.
So it is true. This is why if you see you've tried to get your kid to eat green beans or broccoli or asparagus, anything green, because that seems to be the MO. And no, I'm not going to eat it, I'm not going to eat it. Then all of a sudden they go over to Johnny's house and have a slumber party, and they come back, oh, I love green beans. They're the best. Miss Smith makes the best green beans ever. Well, I've been trying to get you to eat green beans for years. No, Johnny's mom makes the best green beans because Johnny ate them.
Yep.
You know, but that's peer pressure.
Yep.
You know, and we use it in our therapy services because
Absolutely.
it's a great reinforcement.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, it can also be a negative reinforcement.
Yeah,
And
so we got to be careful.
We
yeah.
do. We have to make sure we're not putting, in my terminology, programs,
Yep.
which is in your ABA terminology
Yep,
too.
sure.
But we have to make sure that we're not establishing programs ahead of time. Every single wonderful little soul that comes into this world has got a mission. They have a guidance system that is already built in to know right and wrong. We, as parents, and I say that caregivers, we have to then allow that child that time to develop and grow. Grow and glow. Why? Because they do it at their pace.
Yeah.
And reading some chart, I like to now equivalent this, or say the word for me, Manny, because my tongue's getting tied here.
Yeah.
The equivalent,
equivalent,
of what my mind is looking at when we talk about developmental milestones. I'm tongue-tied today. Is because we also, how many times have you gone to the doctor? That new BMI scale?
Yeah.
I work out at the gym. I've got great muscles, maybe a little top heavy, short girl. Oh man, sorry, you're overweight. By how much? 22 pounds. Right, sure. By whose scale? It's the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
So the same thing that we're looking at weight and BMI and what's healthy and what's not healthy, you know that's a one size fits all.
Yeah.
Same thing when we're looking at developmental milestones. It's one size fits all.
Yeah.
And so that's where this uniqueness of what type of placement and when is this placement ready for my kid.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that I was thinking about with a tidbit for parents, especially those with like young kids, we have a benefit here in our state called early steps, right?
So most, just so you
And
know,
most do?
I can help you on
Okay.
this one. Most states in the United States, because it is a federal-based program, and it is birth to 3, early steps, first care learning. There are multiple
Got
names
different names,
for
but
it.
it's the
Yes,
same.
but it's the same type
Oh,
of
I didn't know that.
program.
See, I didn't know that because my stretch of my kids, the twins are going to be 4, but the next youngest is 11. When he was their age, it wasn't around. So I think we had a pediatrician recommend an OT specialist or a speech
Right.
therapist, but not an early steps program. But now it was almost kind of mandated to us. We were in daycare, and but in a good way, like, hey, we see a need. And it was a daycare teacher, and she was spot on because our twins had some speech delays and stuff. What a great program.
Yes.
But not a lot of people know about it. But it's something that I think that's kind of like your first step into the understanding of, does my child need some extra help?
Absolutely.
And I think
that's
that's a
when we
cool
start
thing.
looking at different class placements.
Right.
So what does a non-standard classroom look like when we're talking about, and it's so funny because we started talking about this with age-appropriate daycare into preschool and prerequisites that are required in the preschool, like potty training.
Yep.
Okay, well that doesn't stop the academic learning. It can be a sensory issue. I had to search for preschools for Loki because he was, number 2, bowel movement trained. He didn't want anything to do with it. He would go to the bathroom, everything. He was in a pull-up, like one of those little pull-up and plays or whatever, by the time he was 1. But the urination sensation for him, he didn't notice it until after the fact.
Interesting.
So that little feeling of, oh, I got to go to the bathroom, had no clue of that.
Wow. Okay.
So once the leakage would start, then he would have a meltdown because he knew what he was doing.
Right.
And then that comes into him mentally being harder on himself at that time it was 3 or 4 than we ever would be.
Yeah,
You know, I'm
right.
that tiger mom. I'm like, okay, well, if you won't deal with my kid, somebody else will. Or like me, I went back to school, got another degree, and was like, okay, I'll do it myself. But I didn't want to, when I watched him go through those crises. And I think that's what we need to talk about, parents, is that if you see your child beating themselves up, and yes, remember what Manny was talking about, at 3, social pressure with his twin. So if you see this and you see the child, I know we see a lot of non-expressive kids that can talk, but they're afraid to because it doesn't sound the same when it comes out. So what does that look like? That can be like little Johnny talking to grandma, and he's babbling along and having this great, and grandma's like, what's he saying? And so I reach out to those of a different generation and ask you to just watch your facial expressions when you talk to nonverbal children, because sometimes they're being verbal, but they withdraw because they're looking at your facial cues.
Yep.
A lot of times you'll see neurodivergent children can't make eye contact. And it's not that they can't, but they fixate. So if I was going to be an autistic person and I'm young and I'm looking at Manny, I'm not being disrespectful when I can't look at him in the eyes and I'm talking to him and I'm looking at it like this. It's because when I look at his face, I'm going to look at his eyebrows. I'm going to look at his forehead. I'm going to look at his nose.
Yep.
I'm going to look. Now I've not paid any attention to what he's saying because I've fixated on, well, asymmetrically, you're a little off here on this, but you got really pretty eyes. But now I'm going to look into, but this is how our children do this.
Yeah.
And so expressive language is also the same thing. We have the one student we both have been working on that is speaking. It's very hard to understand his language.
Yeah.
But he is speaking. But he goes within his shell when somebody goes, what's he saying? Do you understand what he's saying? I can't make out what he's saying. It's not that he's deaf. And he has receptive language, which means he understands what you're saying. And so when he's hearing that, then you can watch. Then the aggression comes out.
Yep.
And then it's like, well, let me show you.
Yeah. And if you think about placement, right? So you have a kid like, so let's use that as an example. Where did they go? Where's the right place for them from an academic, social, emotional growth perspective?
Right.
It most likely is not going to be in a room where the ratio is 1 to 20, 1 to 30.
It can't be. And that's so what we're talking about is a gen ed class.
Yeah.
So general education class, parents. That's what you hear us talk about as a gen ed class. The reason that's a hot point for me is because we have so many individual education plans, which this child would qualify for one. But going into a kindergarten in a classroom of 20 kids with one teacher, this child's never going to be heard.
Right.
And if he's not speaking a language, and well, let's switch this. This is a way for you all to get a visual representation. Let's say that I have 20 kindergartners, and those 20 kindergartners all speak English, but the teacher does not speak English at all. The teacher speaks fluent Spanish, but she has 20 kindergartners in the class. How are those kindergartners going to understand her? See, we don't think about it if the roles are reversed. And if we were parents and we came home and said, oh, Johnny's saying that he can't understand the teacher at all, you would be in the school saying, why do you have a Spanish-speaking teacher teaching my kids that all speak English?
One that you talked about lots of times on our podcast is with even older kids, teenagers who are still stemming.
Absolutely.
When they are in an environment that stemming is distracting for others, is not socially accepted, but yet cognitively, education, academic-wise, even other behaviors, they're fine. Meaning they fit in
Loki
that.
just said it here. He was sitting here on the couch and he talked about how he'll go to the bathroom because he doesn't want to stim in front of other people.
So that should be a flag to the parents to say, is that where I want my kid to thrive? Is that where I want my kid to learn and grow? And if they're 10, 11, 12, these are those formidable years where they're learning what it's like to be a pre-adult.
Yes.
And so do you want your child, your preteen, your teenager, to grow up in an environment that
they can't be
themselves? And we've talked a lot about that, and I think that's a big one for when we talk about placement.
All right, families, we'll be right back after this special message. Are you looking for an alternative to public school? Puzzle Box Academy is your home, where every child is looked at as an individual. Come to Puzzle Box Academy, take your tour today, and you will see the difference. Puzzle Box Academy at www.puzzleboxacademy.com. And now, back to the Purple Couch Podcast. Yeah.
It's interesting working we work in a private school, right? And we work with neurodivergent kids. And then on my personal life, I have a high schooler that's a senior in high school in the public school system. And then the two middle teenagers now are in a charter school, for lack of a better term, but part of the public school, but not really. And then the daycare, which is separate. But watching how we treat our neurodiverse kids, like accept them for who they are and what they are, individualize our education plans so that we can meet them where they are. If they're not a sit down, do the task person, but they'll do the task standing up or walking around or on the floor, we allow that.
Correct.
That's not everywhere.
That's not everywhere.
Right.
So when we talk about a gen ed class, to go into what our demographic that's watching us, in the public school system, a gen ed class is a class that has got up to 25 kids. I mean, I've heard some parents come in and say, oh, well, my class has got 32 this year. I'm like, I can't even imagine.
Oh, yeah.
But
that's those robots now. That's all they're doing is, here's your task, read the chapter.
With 3 hours of homework in the evening.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I want to pin on that there is also a self-contained classroom setting. Now, what is that? That is a smaller classroom that may only have 10 kids in it. And they're normally taught by a special education teacher. And that is a huge difference, because a gen ed teacher and a special education teacher are completely different in their training. Special education teachers understand our kids. They understand that this child may do the same task but need to stand up, or may need to lay down and write on the bottom of their desk, tape their paper.
Right.
Again, environmental. Is it really that important to getting the work done? As long as the work gets accomplished, are they truly a hindrance by standing up versus sitting down?
Right.
And in those smaller classroom settings, that's where the student can get more individualized instruction and care. Now, because we're talking about this is key right now, especially in the world today, is because what we're seeing is a lot of gen ed classrooms where our students are being placed and then being told, oh, but in order to stay in this class, he needs to have a one-to-one with him. Now, we're talking about what is the classroom placement. So classroom placement really does apply when we start talking about accommodations. What accommodations does your child need to be successful? And as a parent, those are the questions you should have at the forefront right now. You should be asking yourself, what does, for me it was Loki, what does Loki thrive? When I sit down and teach Loki, what does he need? Does he need me to constantly come over and go, where are we at? Loki, pay attention. Loki, come through. Loki, refocus. You're out in La La Land. You know, so I'm like, okay, so he needs constant prompting. All right, wonderful. We can tack to that. He needs preferential seating. Why? Because then that way the teacher has eyes on him and he's not in the back of the room watching the squirrel chase outside on the tree. You know, these are little things, but as parents, you know your kids. So if they're watching a video game and you go and you turn the TV off, what happens? Do they melt down? So if they melt down, then we also know that aspect. We know, okay, guess what? My kid needs to be in a place that we can then de-escalate without him having the meltdown. Can't do that if you're in a classroom of 25 kids, because there is no individual time in there, and there is no time for the teacher to be making sure all 25 kids are that way. Then the next part comes in is that, does he really need someone to sit with him? And as a parent, there was a time Loki couldn't do it without somebody sitting right beside him.
Right.
And it wasn't because he couldn't do the work, but he needed constant redirection.
Sure.
That's where the data comes in, parents. When you have a teacher that tells you your kid needs to be constantly redirected, how many times in an hour, teacher? What is the assignment that he's working on that he needs this redirection? The reason I talk about this one-to-one is because this is a new fad. Every kid that has a neurodivergent ability now needs to have, because the teachers don't have the patience or the time to deal with the child. So that one-to-one, paraprofessional, RBT, needs to be with the kid in a gen ed setting. Nope. Hands down, you call an IEP meeting, red flag. That child needs to be in a small classroom setting, not gen ed, before you bring a one-to-one in. The one-to-one, number one, brings public humiliation to the student, because now every place that kid goes, the one-to-one has to go with them. Do you not think kids are going to be watching? And why won't your kid be able to go play? Because now you have an adult that has to tag along. He's not the cool kid now. She's not the cool kid.
Well, and you can also see the opposite effect I've seen, where the other kids want the one-to-one. And they don't understand, especially the young ones. They don't comprehend. Why does Johnny get the Miss Jenkins and I
Correct.
don't? You know, and
Nope.
that's a hard. And then they got to explain it, and
Exactly.
then it becomes a thing. Yeah.
And now, instead of where you made this a help, now you've oh, look at that child. Put a big red light. You know, what was the thing? Was a massive chain store, blue light special. You know,
yeah.
oh, put the blue light right there because now Johnny is the blue light special of the class.
You always talk about like making sure the place fits the kid. Any child or teenager or even adult, think even geriatrics that require a one-to-one, it's because of functional needs. Functional needs, right? Feeding, clothing, dressing, toileting, and then maybe even communication. If we want behaviors, and maladaptive behaviors if it's self-injurious, if you think of that, to protect them, their safety. Outside of those things, a one-to-one prevents their growth.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't help them normalize and socialize. And so if the setting's not right and they tell you you need a one-to-one, why? What is the context of that whole situation where you're telling me, the teacher or the admin, you're telling me my kid needs a one-to-one? They don't need a one-to-one in my house.
Yes.
So why would they need a one-to-one somewhere else?
Well, and I know we focused a lot on preschool, early, like kindergarten and elementary, because that's when it really hits.
Right.
But there's another aspect of this that comes into play, and that's in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So in high school parents, I know that a lot of us now have online options, charter school options, private school options, public school options. But when you start looking at, and everybody calls it something different, middle school, junior high, you know, senior
Primary,
high.
what was the other
Yeah,
one?
exactly.
Yeah.
Secondary now,
Yeah.
we're in the secondary campus, or we're in the upper or middle or
Upper,
lower.
yeah.
Okay, guys, when you start working on your credits in order to reach graduation,
There we go.
it is critical, parents. I cannot stress this, and I'm saying this to you from the kids' aspect. They busted their butt to get to this final stretch. They have worked themselves to the bone to get to graduation. Make sure it counts. Make sure the school is accredited. Because if their high school program is not accredited and they go to graduate, you're looking at more expenses in college because they're going to have to take prerequisite classes. Because even though you might have went to an elite private school, if the program was not an accredited program, then they basically got a GED and you have to go take the test before they can even get into the college.
It's frustrating for them, for sure.
Not just that, it's more expensive
And
because
more
your
expensive.
first year of college, up to $3,000, $4,000, depending on your school, $6,000, are in classes that don't even count towards their degree.
Yeah. Right.
So we could talk about that on another podcast. But to wrap this up for our parents, this is our tips and tricks moment.
Yep.
I would tell the parents to sit down and look at themselves as a diagnosing parent and look at how your kid's environment is at home. Not in educational needs, but how do you get them to do chores? Do they do any chores? Because see, now you're already building what we would call the foundation of the IEP, which is where their learning level's at. And that's functional learning. Can they make their own bed? Can they wash clothes? Can they do dishes? Do they need constant prompting to do these? See, you know your kid. We're just giving you tools to look at them from an outside view. And then when you see what needs that you provide them in the daily at home, man, put them in a high-stress environment of school, they're going to need those accommodations and more. So look at what accommodations you're making at home and ensure the school can also provide those. That would be my tip and trick for today.
Yeah, mine would be, you know, one of the things that's probably the most commonality across all parents, whether it's neurotypical, neurodivergent, whatever, no matter what kind of, we have pediatricians, we have doctors for our kids, right? So we talked about the developmental milestones. And I'm blessed with a pediatrician that uses this terminology when it comes to those. It's a guideline. They're guides. They're not set in stone. Every kid is different. But use it as a guideline so that you can know, okay, if they're not quite there, where are they? And then how do we build those blocks to get them as close to as that as possible, if necessary, depending on what we're talking about. And I think that's always been something that's resonated with me. I don't need my kid to fit in that
Don't be a
perfect
robot.
bubble, but it's a nice guideline to help me understand, is there areas they need to, build upon.
I love that. So parents, I hope you found this episode insightful and it gave you some tools and some courage and confidence to stand up to your school administrators to look for the best environment for your student. So make sure you like, subscribe, and come back when we have another episode of Pam and the Purple Couch Podcast. Until next time, see you later.